Good afternoon, and on behalf of the Bundeskanzler-Helmut-Schmidt-Stiftung, I welcome you to our lunchtime discussion. It is entitled Ekrem İmamoğlu and the Future of Turkish Democracy, Change or Authoritarian Backsliding. My name is Dan Krause. I am Program Director, Europe and International Politics, and I will be moderating today. Before I introduce our two wonderful guests, let me briefly say a few words about the planned schedule and our idea for this event. It is going to be a 1 hour event, and after a few introductory words, we will watch a short film. Then I will introduce our guests and we will start our conversation. So 60 minutes isn't long. Nevertheless, we want to try to include at least some questions from you, the audience, in the second part. So if you got questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function to ask your questions. The shorter and more precise they are, of course, the easier it will be for us to address them. Our thoughts, or my thoughts for this event, were influenced by the fact that domestic political events in Turkey at the moment seem to come to a culmination point. Since March, we can see that the opposition, and especially the biggest opposition party, the CHP, is under constant pressure by the judiciary and the police. Ekrem İmamoğlu, its most prominent figure, mayor of Istanbul and leading candidate for the presidential elections, as well as numerous local mayors, party members, and thousands of demonstrators are in prison. A court decision to remove the leadership and impose a state trustee on the CHP, originally scheduled for Monday, 8 days ago, has now been postponed to October. This would most likely mean the end of Turkey's multi-party system, and in view of the significance of these developments in a country as important to us in Germany and Europe as Turkey, we find the political reactions in Germany and Europe, as well as the media coverage, surprisingly restrained. In addition, Ekrem İmamoğlu was our guest and esteemed speaker at our Helmut Schmidt lecture for a Just Democracy in November 2024 in Berlin. We therefore feel particularly obliged to point out that a very important representative and advocate of Turkish democracy and the Turkish people has now been in prison for over 200 days. But instead of further words, let us now a short film that we prepared. And Miriam, please, let's roll the clip.
Let's face it, democracy is under threat all around the world.
Evin 16 milyon İstanbullunun konutunun kapısına yığmıştır. Yüzlerce polis yığmıştır.
Police in Turkey have arrested the mayor of Istanbul, who's a key rival of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Biggest protests in more than a decade.
Massive countrywide protests.
They're angry about the arrest of Ekrem İmamoğlu.
Ekrem İmamoğlu.
Ekrem İmamoğlu.
Ekrem İmamoğlu.
Ekrem İmamoğlu.
Democratic populism versus populism tarifi yapmaya gayret ettim ve aslında söylemeye çalıştığım güçlü bir vatandaşı odağına alan, onu hisseden, ihtiyaçlarını karşılayan vatandaşın yönetimin bir parçası olduğunu, kamu yönetiminin ondan uzak bir yer olmadığını. By embracing equality, freedom, solidarity, and rule of law, we can ensure that in the 21st century, democracy remains the most powerful force for justice and progress, as well as peace at home, peace in the world.
Yeah, so here we are back, and Ekrem İmamoğlu and CHP are at the center of the current repressions, of course. And I believe that by watching the film, we have gained a good impression of what is happening in Turkey today and what is at stake. At the same time, I think that the protest, especially among the young generation, seems to go even further about devalued diplomas, blocked prospects for the future, denied freedoms, and the feeling that their voices no longer count and that democracy in Turkey might finally degenerate into a mere facade. To discuss all of the questions we raised and what we have seen in the movie, we have two wonderful guests, and I would like to now introduce them to you. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Ayşegül Kars Kaynar, an expert on contemporary Turkish politics, legal and constitutional history of Turkey, and civil military relations. She writes regularly in distinguished academic journals and has translated two political science reference books into Turkish language. Currently, she is working at the Grand National Assembly and she is also giving lectures at the Technical University of Ankara. Dr. Kaynar,
Thank you
willkommen
for
herzlich
having me,
willkommen.
Dan. Thank you
Hoş
very much for
geldin.
having me. Thank you. Welcome. Herzlich willkommen.
Our second guest, Dr. Can Dündar, is a journalist, author, and a documentary filmmaker. He was the editor-in-chief of the government critical newspaper Cumhuriyet, and in 2015, his newspaper published footage of showing the state intelligence sending weapons to Syrian Islamist fighters, and he was then charged with espionage and revealing state secrets. In November 2015, he was imprisoned, and in May 2016, he was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment, which was later raised to 27 years. During his appeal in 2016, he survived an assassination attempt and left Turkey to Germany, where he now lives in Berlin. He is still working as a journalist, also a filmmaker, and among other things, he writes a weekly bilingual column for die Wochenzeitung Die Zeit, and he runs the independent German-Turkish journalism platform Özgürüz. For his work and his commitment, he has received numerous awards and honors. Dr. Dündar, also welcome, and thank you both for joining us. Hoş geldin again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having us. And thank you
I would
for
like to
thank you
yeah,
very much for your support and solidarity, dear then, and of course to the Helmut Schmidt Foundation for organizing this event. Thank you so much.
thank you very much. And I would like to begin with you and ask you my first question. Many observers, including yourself, have described current events in Turkey and the trial against the leadership of the CHP as decisive weeks for Turkey, possibly even a key moment in Turkish recent history. The Erdogan government has now been in power for over 20 years. From your perspective, why are these events decisive, and why does it happen now when we have still more than 3 years to go until the next election?
For several reasons. First, as you said, it's already 2 decades. It's been 2 decades that Erdogan has been ruling this country. And in this more than 20 years, for the first time, he lost an election last year, the local elections. And this was, of course, a cornerstone for Turkish democracy. And since then, of course, the tension is high because he understood that it's almost impossible for him to win another election because almost all the opinion polls show that if there's an election today, he would lose it. And this is another reason. And CHP is now on the rise, and really Social Democrats has been running well against this aggression. And with the municipalities, who represents the almost 62% of the people, the whole population, they are really doing great job. And with the new leadership in CHP, it's been a threat for Erdogan's government. That's why he decided to go for an uh, unusual tactic against the party system. And what his solution is to get the municipalities from CHP by using judiciary and police force. So especially in Istanbul, starting with Mr. İmamoğlu, now I guess as far as I know, it's 11 mayors are in jail only from Istanbul, and in total something like 17. It changes daily. And you know what? I'm at the same time watching my Turkish TV now, and now the headline is about Ankara municipality. Can you imagine this? I mean, we are talking about the attack over Istanbul municipality while we are at the same time watching the news about a possible raid against Ankara municipality, which is governed by CHP again. So it's daily even hourly business for Turkey a struggle between autocracy and democracy, and that's why it's very decisive moment at this time.
Thank you very much. If you allow me another question towards you, when you compare um, the current situation to the Gezi Park protests in 2013 and what you experienced personally in 2015-16, what are the similarities and where are the differences today?
Similarities, I can say that the pressure was high back then, but it's higher today. And the people's reaction are similar, really. I mean, people were fed up with it at that time. And Erdogan was using heavy police force. Uh, and he succeeded to smash the uprising at that time. And world's attention was more on Turkey comparing today. Unfortunately, we lost this interest by Western circles, Western politicians, and Western media. At that time, they were, broadcasting from Gezi Park live. And today, we cannot see any German media covering all those events.
Yeah, that's very true. The control of the media is very harsh at the moment. Let's turn now to you, Dr. Kaynar. Um, Can Dündar just outlined what is happening in Turkey and what is at stake. You are a political scientist based in Ankara. What is your evaluation of the current situation and what's going on?
Well, at present, Turkey is in a state of constant turmoil. Each day, we are hearing news about new judicial attacks to trust or appointment of trustees or a court decision on a critical matter. Just a couple of hours ago, as Can Dündar mentioned, there's another criminal investigation started against Ankara municipality. But 2 days ago, we see that main opposition party hold an extraordinary congress just to neutralize the effects of the legal challenges or the legal crackdown against the party leader Özgür Özel. Again, 4 days ago, an appellate court upheld the prison sentence and the political ban imposed of Ekrem İmamoğlu. This again very crucial. This ruling stripped Ekrem İmamoğlu of his political rights for 4 years. It means that he won't be able to run in the upcoming presidential elections as the candidate of the Republican Party. Of course, it is not the final decision, and the case will now be seen by the Court of Cassation. However, we know that the Court of Cassation is packed by the jurists who are almost handpicked by the GDP government. So there is actually little hope for a reversal in the decision. So you already mentioned about the court decision that adjourned the verdict on the 38th Congress of the Republican Party. So a lot of things goes around, and there is a tension now created by the power about main opposition party. Why such kind of turmoil? Why it is such kind of turbulence around the main opposition party? It is that the ruling power, the GDP, is trying to shape the political landscape of Turkey forcefully. In doing so, it has launched what I call a lawfare against the main opposition party. So what it means, lawfare, is that it is actually a war. It is actually a direct attack to a main opposition party. However, this war is waged by legal means. What is very significant is that Republican Party, the opposition party, is the largest political party today. It represents half of the people. So intervening into the functions of such the largest party of the country amounts to a very significant, a very profound infringement on the popular will and also to the representative system. So what is we are living currently is an attack to not only democracy but also to the republican form of the state. That is very significant, and this is what separates the previous attacks from today's. Hence, yeah, this is the current situation, and it still goes on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Because you just mentioned the attack on the Republic, maybe we can stick to that at a for the moment. Most analysts already declare that Turkey is not a democracy anymore, it's an autocratic system in which elections are still held and they are free but unfair. And I recall that one of your articles, there was the headline, Unfree, Unfair, and Uncertain. Um, so we have different systems of autocratic rule. What kind of political system do we have in Turkey in your eyes, and how would you describe it?
Mm. I will give it a little bit extended answer to this question. It needs a little bit analysis because it is for a decade that the governing party has effectively, de facto, suspended the principle of electoral turnover. So it is not the first time. The first time that it became evident is the 2015 general elections. At that time, the GDP lost the majority and did not elect it as a majority party. And at that time, we see that national security discourse is activated and many violent incidents took place, including bombs in Ankara and Istanbul. Afterwards, a quick snap election was called, and immediately in the snap elections, the GDP restored its majority party position. So 2024 local elections is the second time in a decade that the ruling party experienced an electoral defeat. So after this local elections, many parties, including myself, were very anxious whether the GDP will honor the election results or will take action. And unfortunately, we see that the GDP did take action. Yet that time, it did not activate the national security discourse. However, instead of, it started to use mainly two instruments. The first instrument is appointment of trustees to municipalities that won by the opposition, not only by Republican Party, but mainly by the Republican Party. In that way, the ruling party established a tutelary system and brought the municipalities under central government, under the control of central government. So to the best of my knowledge, since 2024 local elections, 13 municipalities are now currently being ruled by trustees. The second instrument is a widening of repression through corruption and terror-related cases against opposition-led municipalities. Again, to the best of my knowledge, 15 mayors have been detained so far, and 12 of them belongs to the main opposition Republican Party, including the incarcerated Istanbul mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. So this number includes Ekrem İmamoğlu. In other words, it is a decade that the incumbent party GDP declared it will not allow a turnover, it will not allow a peaceful turnover in the elections. Similarly, it is a decade that Turkey lost its ability to conduct free and fair elections, free and fair elections. Therefore, I believe in order to assess today, making an assessment currently on the basis of the elections, whether they are fair, free, periodic, or competitive, will miss the broader transformation because there is a broader transformation going on. In other words, it will not be wrong to define the political regime as hegemonic competitive system, which is followed or developed from competitive authoritarianism. It is not wrong to say that this is hegemonic authoritarian. However, defining or focusing on this electoral issues will give us a very limited perspective and will fall short of capturing the change in relation between GDP and the popular will, and as well as it will short of capturing the relation between GDP and the social classes. Therefore, I will emphasize two features of the current regime, which I see definitive in understanding GDP rule. The first one is that ruling party is a minority right now. So Turkey is under minority rule. Moreover, since March 19, the GDP continues to lose its voter base. So numerous polls have been conducted. It is almost every week that a new poll is being conducted. Apart from a couple of polling companies that are close to the government, the polls reveal a decrease in the GDP's voter support, and it shows an increase for the Republican Party. Also, the membership to the Republican Party is at rise right now. So it is very obvious. The GDP maintains this legal crackdown, maintains its lawfare against the Republican Party at the cost of further diminishing its voter base. So it is kind of the GDP now knows that it is minority, and it kind of accepts that it will rule as a minority. This is the first feature. The second prominent feature is that the current regime has a very clear social class character. Since 2019, GDP is disproportionately transferring income, disproportionately transferring wealth to the capital owners, and particularly favoring finance capital vis-à-vis the productive capital. So it uses three state policies to do that. First, tax policy, wage policy, and social aids. Let me very, very quickly give some numbers about these policies. The first one is tax policy. In 2024, tax constituted 90% of the state budget. It is very huge. 90% of the revenues comes from the taxes. And within these taxes, the amount of the indirect tax, which is levied all of the people, regardless of the income, is very high. Only two indirect taxes, value-added tax and the special income tax, constitute more than half of these revenues. So it means that the GDP is extensively taxing low and middle income groups in the society. Conversely, it is it issues tax exemptions, tax amnesties for the business. Again, in 2024, one-fourth of the state revenue, which is again very huge, one-fourth of the revenues were allocated as tax exemptions, tax amnesties. So the second one is wage policy. Currently, half of the Turkish population lives with minimum wage. And moreover, minimum wage is not increased in relation or approximated to the inflation rate. It is always below the inflation rate. So we see that austerity measures are suppressing the wages. And the last one is social aids. Now, currently, the amount of the social aids is only 10% of the budget. This is the lowest in OECD countries. And social aids are very much restricted to complex eligibility criteria. Overall, what it shows that currently GDP is transferring wealth to finance capital, and in return, it is supported by the finance capital. In other words, capital owners, I will say, can go with this authoritarian regime. They can go with the erosion of political rights for a
Yeah.
long time. So in conclusion, we have a political minority, and that political minority is supported by finance capital. I think this gives us a version of autocratic plus oligarchic regime. And in many of us now, currently, the GDP government symbolizes a rule of the rich over the poor.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and it's certainly very interesting what you said about the financial aspects. But when you mentioned the oligarch system, that reminded me that Dr. Dündar, you said that Erdogan aspires to become like Putin, to build a similar system in Turkey. Um, in your view, has this strategy been successful, and how does the situation in Turkey is comparable, and in what aspects does the situation differ from the situation in Russia?
Turkey is not another Russia yet, not another Iran yet or Syria. You must see that there's a tug of war between democratic forces and the autocratic system. So Turkey is still a kind of a winnable country. So Erdogan wants to be another Putin, that's for sure. But Turkish people refuse to be another Russia. That's another thing. That's why this pendulum is, very active at the moment. So imagine a system that the president has the ability uh, to control the whole judicial system, the media, the parliament, the police force, gendarmerie, the army, intelligence, mafia, economic sources, universities, academia. So he, you name it, he has it. That's why it's a huge, huge control system. So, but still, this country is resisting. This is the good side of it. And you can see people demonstrating every week in the CHP meetings or demonstrations, etc. So this is the hopeful side of it. Otherwise, of course, I mean, when you look at it from afar, you can see that, hey, it's an autocracy, but not yet. There are still ways to go there. And I hope that in the democratic resistance of the people will win in the end.
Yeah, thank you very much. Since we already touched a little bit on the economic situation, Dr. Dündar, um, I think it is also, of course, very important, and what Dr. Kaynar has outlined about the reduction in the social aid and so on. The Turkish economy is still growing, but on the other hand, the Turkish lira is under pressure. We see a very high inflation rate, which means a big loss of purchasing power, and the young people they have a limited prospects. To what extent does Turkey's economic situation comes into play, and how does it influence the government's strategy and room for maneuver?
So Professor Kaynar explained it very well. I can only add that this social aid policy of the government has been keeping them in power. Mostly, most of the people who has been affected by the poverty has been supportive to CHP, the ruling party, even if they are not politically close to them. They have kind of interest in getting social aid, or they have relatives in the municipalities or in the government, so they don't want to lose them. That's why, as far as I understand, there's something like 20%, 25% of really um, the supporters of the real supporters of the ruling party, and more than 50% is against them. But there's another 20, 25% in between. They are really trying to find out a solution for their economic misery. And if they trust the main opposition party that they would not lose their jobs or social aid in the coming elections, they are ready to support the opposition parties. That's why it's very important for the opposition parties to, trust, to show their strength and convince people that they will run the country better.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Dr. Kaynar, since you are on the ground in Turkey, and Dr. Dündar just talked about the difference in comparison to the Russian population, I would be interested in your evaluation of how the Turkish society is responding to all of this, to the arrests, and how would you characterize, you already did elaborate a little bit on this, that the different camps or blocks we have in the Turkish society?
Yeah. Uh, One who will talk about Turkish society and dynamism of Turkish society shall first acknowledge that Turkish society is living under heavy pressure for decades. So this must be acknowledged beforehand. So even small protests are suppressed with heavy-handed police force, and strikes are, for instance, worker strikes are banned on the ground of national security. And we have to remember that Turkish citizens actually paid a very high price in order to exercise a constitutional right of demonstration and protest. The memory of the Gezi protests in 2013, which claimed 7 lives, still vivid. Also, similarly, during the Kobane protests in 2014, the death toll was high as 42, and this death toll appeared only in 4 or 5 days. So, I mean, it goes without saying that the freedom of expression is curtailed. Nevertheless, we see that civil society in Turkey remains very dynamic, and it demonstrated that it is ready to mobilize. So on 19th of March, as you said, after İmamoğlu's detention, it sparked a very large protest that we didn't see perhaps for a decade. One must see that demonstrations brought many grievances together. The day before İmamoğlu's arrest, his university diploma was revoked by a committee, university committee that actually lacked legal authority to that. So this revocation also fueled the anger of the youth, and we saw the protests are led mainly by the university citizens. What these people were protesting? They were protesting, okay, the assault on democracy and elections. However, they were also protesting the devaluation of university education, devaluation of the university diplomas, rise in unemployment, poverty, and the deepening of the anxieties on the future. So demonstrations spread to many cities very quickly, and they lasted for a week. Later on, we see that Republican People's Party transformed these demonstrations into party rallies. In this sense, one could say that they amassed the protests within the party. These rallies are still held. Party rallies, they are held twice a week. Once in one of the districts in Istanbul, the other one is another city in Turkey. For instance, just 2 days ago, the rally was held in Ankara and approximately 50,000 people gathered. Demonstrations, of course, one may say that they are stronger than the party rallies, and turning these demonstrations into party rallies may dilute their strength. However, it is important that people are coming to these rallies. And every rally of the Republican Party is met with great enthusiasm by the people, because I believe it gives the people a chance to exercise a right that denied them for long. So, what is striking again is that I think the threshold of fear is already being crossed by the people. And whenever the Republican Party or, let me say, a workers' union will call for a rally, that call will be met by the people with enthusiasm. So it is important to see this dynamic side of the civil society.
Thank you very much. The economic situation is worsening. The protest is still alive and rising. On the other hand, Erdogan government seems to be counting on time, and we still have 3 years until the next election. Dr. Dündar, if we see a further autocratization, if we see more political instability, more protest, I mean, how can the government still put their bets on the time card? What is your assessment?
As you mentioned, I mean, Erdogan is playing on time. He thought that he thinks that he has still another 3 years, at least 3, 4 years even. And he trusts the police force he's commanding, and the army, of course, that he can smash the opposition as he did during the Gezi Park protests. So another dimension is that. And he found ways to, imagine if you're a ruler of a country and if you have the authority to put your most important rival into jail just with a order of a judge in your control, it's so easy to run a country. So he trusts that he can do it anyway. I mean, whoever his rival is, he can put him her in jail in a moment. That's another thing. And of course, nowadays he's trusting the silence of the Western world, uh, unfortunately. And he has a meeting on Wednesday with President Trump. So there are lots of similarities between the two. So I'm sure they have lots in common to talk about. And then, of course, I mean the whole world political climate is in favor of him. That's why another thing is that dimension.
Yeah, you just mentioned it, and I would like to shift from the domestic picture to the international arena a bit. And you just said it that under the Erdogan government and the current conditions of the international system, they positioned Turkey very smart. It's a member of NATO. It's an accession candidate of the European Union. At the same time, they applied for membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which, with the exemption of India, is largely a club of autocracies. It is centrally located between Europe and Asia, controls the Black Sea, and so on. And it has positioned itself as a key player in certain major conflicts in relevant regions, such as Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the Middle East, Iraq, and Syria. And of course, from a European perspective and the EU perspective, very important, there is the refugee agreement with the European Union. So many states, as you just said, they find it difficult or they do not draw consequences from the transformation of the Turkish political system into an autocratic system. Um, Maybe I would like to ask again you, Dr. Dündar, first, because you so strongly advocate for this response or an answer from Germany and the European Union and the member states towards the situation in Turkey and the repression wave. How should Germany, how should the EU respond? What kind of measures or actions strengthen the Turkish opposition, Turkish democracy, and on the other hand, which reactions might be backfire or counterproductive in a way that what I mean is that sometimes President Erdogan tries to cast himself as a defender of Turkish sovereignty, Turkish pride, Turkish honor against interventions from outside.
First of all, what you are doing at the moment is a very good example of what the Western world can do. I mean, listen to us and show solidarity with the democratic resistance in Turkey. That's what you are doing at the moment. That's why we are thankful to your efforts and your solidarity. This is the least you can do. But I guess the refugee deal was the turning point in relations with EU and Turkey. From then on, the European countries, especially Germany, decided to pay an amount of money to Erdogan's government and to keep the refugees in Turkish soil and stop them going to Europe. And in return, unfortunately, they turned a blind eye to the authoritarian rule in Turkey. That was a horrible mistake, and still so, unfortunately. So this they don't want to annoy Erdogan in any case, and they are just watching what's going on in the country, and they don't show any kind of reaction. Sometimes we can hear some condemnations, but that's all. I mean, Turkish government is refusing to obey the rule of the European Court of Justice, and they don't care. So NATO, of course, is important. They need Turkey as a soldier to protect the European soil, but they don't need Turkey as a family member in the European Union. So it's a long story, but I guess Turkish people fed up with it. And now, unfortunately, many people trust that Russia or China or India would be a better, partner for Turkey. So this is a kind of a natural result of the European refusal of Turkey, and of course Erdogan doesn't want to put all the eggs into the same basket, so he's playing around with Russia, with China, with US, and with European countries. That's why I'm not so much optimistic about the European governments or the political elite. But I'm hopeful that European society, European civil society, can do something. And for example, municipalities, I mean, Turkish municipalities are under attack. Then they can show their solidarity. They have twin cities in Turkey. Trade unions, parties, women organizations, youth organizations, universities, I mean, those are the civil society dynamics that they can show their solidarity. They can attend their court cases. They can show their solidarity with the prisoners, political prisoners in Turkey. And there are many ways of supporting the democratic resistance, and especially German media, for example. I mean, they can put more pressure on Turkish government by covering what's going on in Turkey. And I mean, those are the easiest parts, but I'm not sure if we can see it under these circumstances because they are so busy with the other. The world is not in the best period of time, unfortunately, and Turkey is not on the agenda anymore.
Yeah, that's so true, and we live in this poly crisis at the moment. But actually, that brings me to the point to bring in one question from the audience, which points in the same direction, and maybe you, Dr. Kaynar, might elaborate a little bit on that. So the question points in the same direction, and it is what influence do European states have, and on the one hand side, and on the other, what are the key factors that determine the political future of Turkey, and how can we influence and help at the moment? Dr. Kaynar, you
Exactly. I'm trying to
have you read the
kind of,
question?
yeah. So what is
Okay.
the influence of EU states and how can
Yeah,
European Union help? I don't want to repeat the same things that Can Dündar already elaborated because, well, so far European Union, let me say, could not pass the democratic test for Turkey, I would say. Again, still in the European Union, in the key papers of the European Union, Turkey is referred as a key partner, a country of strategic relevance or important ally. Also, Can Dündar very shortly mentioned about this Osman Kavala case, in which in 2022 the Court of Human Rights declared that there would be some sanctions if Turkey would not implement the Court of Human Rights decision. However, we are in 2025 and we see no sanctions, and we see that in the Kavala's case again, dialogue, quote unquote, dialogue is established between Erdogan government and the European Union. But the point is that the truth is that every action and every step from the European Union is watched very carefully in Turkey by the democratic movements. Therefore, I would say any kind of declaration of support for the pro-democratic movement for the pro-democratic movements are highly appreciated. So this kind of declarations of support we heard in the case of İmamoğlu, where the members of the European Parliament issued statements, or the delegation from Eurocities visited Istanbul to show their solidarity. So one thing about Turkish opposition is that half of the population is living under heavy pressure with restricted rights for about 15 years. And this situation creates a sense of isolation and captivity. So the many people in Turkey feels like captive nations under dictatorships. So therefore, it is important for us to feel that this population, half of the population, are not forgotten and they are not alone. I can't imagine any kind of way for it. Anyways, any statement, any gesture would help.
and we talked a lot about what the media can do, what civil society can do, and also gestures and pressure from the governments. But let me stick to the question of what European member states can do on the level from state to state. I mean, we have the possibility, or we have the opportunity of putting public pressure on the Turkish government, and at the same time, it might not help, and maybe quiet diplomacy might be a better thing to do. On the other hand, we have incentives for Turkey. I mean, Turkey is still interested in doing business with the European Union. And for instance, there's the opportunity of probably modernizing the customs union between the European Union and Turkey, which is in the current condition of Turkish economy, probably a very big incentive. And also, Turkey wants to have a say in the European security architecture. How do you see this? I mean, actually, this question goes to both of you. Maybe Dr. Dündar, you would like to start?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, there are some ways to at least convince the Turkish government to do some democratic progress. And the most important leverage is the promise of EU membership, of course. Uh, During the process, Turkey changed a lot of aggressive rules and regulations thanks to this negotiation process, and it was very fruitful then. But when the negotiations stop and the European dream is gone, Turkish government is truly backsliding from democratic rule now. That's why it's very important to revive the at least the process of the full membership. And it seems like a dream at the moment as the Europeans are getting, building up high walls around Europe nowadays instead of opening up the doors. But still, I mean, in case of Turkey, it's very important. This promise is very important. And any kind of sanctions, unfortunately, may put harm on the people instead of the government. That's why I'm not in favor of that kind of pressures, unfortunately. I don't know what Mr. Ayşegül would say.
Well, similar things. The first and easiest way of giving a positive sign uh, is to hold away these visa restrictions, because there's a de facto visa restriction for Turkish people, even for the students. They are not able to go to the European Union countries easily. They are kind of discriminated, and that's kind of discrimination is backfiring. As Can Dündar said, it is further creating a negative image for Europe. That is, in European Union seems to be a lost case already. So, first of all, what they can do is to start with kind of very easy steps and open the door again, open this idea that European Union again holding a hand of Turkey, and in that way, perhaps the states can help. Well, whatever we say will be crushed by the real politics. However, again, as I said, if EU states have such common intention, they can use many ways, many policies to say that, to indicate that Erdogan is not able to follow the way that it already followed. So there, I mean, they can give a message to Erdogan to stop somewhere, do not go further. However, so far we didn't see such kind of a message yet.
Can I add something at this
Mm.
moment? Um, I was in Austria last weekend for a talk, and I watched an interview with the mayor of Vienna. And when he was asked about Mr. İmamoğlu's arrestment, he said it's an internal affair in Turkey, so he shouldn't intervene. He's a social democrat mayor, and he knows İmamoğlu very well. So this approach, most probably it's because of the Turkish population living in the city, or they have some connections with the Erdogan government, whatever. But we should admit, we should understand that there's no internal issue when it comes to the human rights policies. So, was, for example, Navalny's murder, was it an internal issue of Russia? So in our world, there's no internal issues when it comes to the human rights violations. So it's not our problem in Turkey. It's not Mr. Navalny's family's problem in Russia. It's our problem. If we want to live in a democratic planet, we have to fight together against the autocrats. So it's not Germany, not Turkey, but bad guys in Germany and good guys in Turkey. As the autocrats living, learning from each other and, supporting each other, we should support each other and come together and fight against the autocracy all over the world.
Yes, and I would totally agree. And I would also add that the European Union and the member states, they should have an interest in a democratic Turkey also because a further autocratization might also mean, from a just strategic point of view, that Turkey, the economical situation, the political situation might get even worse, and all the rules that Turkey at the moment is fulfilling in strategic questions, they might no longer be able to fulfill if the whole system, the whole stability is worsening, which is only on the strategic level, on the interest level. But of course, you are totally right. A question that just came to my mind is the another thing, because you mentioned again Ekrem İmamoğlu. I think it is an interesting parallel that Erdogan served as mayor of Istanbul and then was imprisoned and later became prime minister.
Yeah.
Do people in Turkey see this parallel, and what's your point on that?
Of course, I mean, it's so obvious that he knows the path very well because he experienced this first-hand experience, and that's why he's trying to stop him. But knowing the result, of course, he is scared that the same thing would happen to him, what happened to his rivals. The soldiers put him in jail, and now nobody remembers them, but he has become the president. And of course, now putting Imamoglu in jail and keeping him there, giving more strength to him, and it's obvious that he's turning into a hero while he's in jail.
Dr. Kaynar, what is your view from Ankara?
We have a domestic saying, and it goes like this: whoever governs Istanbul can also govern the country. So, one point of the saying is that Istanbul is such a huge, such a complex, such a populated city, then it is actually a country itself. But also, the saying includes it means that the mayor of Istanbul would be experienced enough, it would have the experience enough to run a country. So of course there is the parallel, and people believe in that the mayor of Istanbul, İmamoğlu, have the capacity and capability. It is not only being elected or not, but he is capable of running the Turkey, running the government, can deal with all the diplomatic issues, whatever. So the parallelism is already there. It's obvious. So it's again, as Can Dündar said, that's why Erdogan is fearing a lot. So it remembers me again. There is this Me Too movement, you remember, and there is the motto of Me Too movement is that shame must change side. And very parallel to that, in Turkey, fear must change side. And I think it is already done. Already fear has changed side, and that explains the legal crackdown that we are experiencing today.
Oh, that's a wonderful thought. Thank you for sharing this with us. Um, Time is running a little bit. Before we wrap up, I have like two questions to both of you, and you can either answer both or just one of them. The first question is, of course, we cannot predict the future, but when we look ahead, what is your expectation for the next weeks, maybe months, or years until the next election in 2028? What do you expect? Do you expect a compromise with early elections? Do you expect something like a stalemate or a further authoritarian consolidation? And the second question, maybe more interesting to a European or German audience, what are our biggest misperceptions? Can Dündar and you, Dr. Kaynar, you already lined out that Turkish society is so much vibrant and different, and some people might expect, and the protest is still alive. So, what is our biggest misperception about Turkish society and the democratic resilience of it?
May I go with the first question? That what we expect. Well, what we expect defend really depends on which actors we are following to. So on the one hand, we will keep an eye on the popular resistance around the main opposition party. It is not only the governing cadre, administrative cadre of the main opposition party, but also the popular opposition that supports the main opposition party. That's one thing we have talked about. That I would like to talk about another development that we have to watch to understand or to get an idea of the developments of Turkey in the long run, not perhaps in the upcoming months, but in the 2 years time. In 2017, as we know, we had changed our political regime from parliamentary system to presidential system. And within that amendment, also the current constitution imposes a two-term limit for the presidency. So it means that currently Erdogan's presidency for the third time in the next elections will be unconstitutional. And for that reason, the governing party is talking a lot about drafting a new constitution. I think this is a very important and very serious development. I think that time, I mean, the reason is obvious, but that time, the GDP party gonna write a new constitution for Turkey because the requirement is there. Only lifting this two-term presidential limit, Erdogan can run or can be the next president again. However, GDP cannot draft a new constitution alone. So that's why we have to watch with whom the new constitution will be penned together. And in this context, the Kurdish movement emerges as one of the noteworthy actor. So another side of the development in Turkey, very significant this year, is that in May, Kurdish armed organization PKK dissolved itself, and in July it buried the arms. It laid down the arms. This highly historical developments took place after the call of the nationalist leader of the nationalist movement party. So the peaceful resolution of the 40-year-long, very brutal, very bloody conflict by the GDP is a clear sign of a cooperation and reconciliation between Kurdish movement and the ruling party. In the following days, following years, we will watch if this cooperation will transform itself into a political alliance. Currently, it has been denied. The People's Equality and Democratic Party, political representative of the Kurdish movement, denies that there is a political alliance. However, we will see. We have to keep an eye on it. We have to keep an eye on it. This will be crucial for penning of the new and the quoting of the civil constitution of Turkish Republic.
Thank you.
I'll try to combine the two. I'm always hopeful. I'm a bit tired of being hopeful though. But I'm expecting in the short run a kind of an autocratic consolidation that's inevitable. If you're an autocrat and you're about to lose your throne, of course you have to do something to prevent it. And I don't see any other way for Erdogan to stay in power. That would be a bit difficult period of time, but in the end, I'm sure the democratic resistance will prevail. And believe me, I mean, this is a daily question for us. Every morning we get up with this question. Will it be the end of it? Today, this week, this month, this year, or it will take more time? So, of course, we used to live with this question, and hopefully it will end soon. But the misperception issue is really very important question. Thank you for asking this. I guess after winning so many elections in Turkey, Erdogan seems like unbeatable by even the Western forces, Western governments. They thought Turkish people wants to live under the autocratic rule. This was wrong. I don't know. I mean, they maybe it was because, of course, how Erdogan governs and controls the whole dimensions of democratic rule. And at the same time, the opposition was divided, and the social democrats were not so much so powerful as they are today, etc. But now they should understand that this country has been under heavy pressure for the last decade and still resisting. And this is the hopeful side of it, and we are coming to the end of it. And they should now understand that in Turkey we don't accept any kind of autocracy, even if our lives were destroyed, even if we are in jail or in exile, we will keep on resisting. And the Western countries, Western governments should not sacrifice their values for their daily business, daily interests. And we should stick to the principles as democracy, as secularism, as human rights, as press freedom.
Yes, thank you very much for elaborating on the first question, albeit although it is getting you tired. Sorry, but of course the democracy, the protest still alive, the resilience is really astonishing, and thank you for answering my question about the biggest misperception. Time is actually nearly up, but before we leave, you told me, Dr. Dündar, before in the small chat we had before that there is a very important project coming up in Berlin on October 1st, which is in direct relation to our topic today. Maybe you would like to say a few words on that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when Mr. İmamoğlu was arrested, I immediately wrote a letter to the mayor of Berlin, saying that Istanbul is a twin city and you should do something to show solidarity. And they were kindly invited me, and immediately, and we developed this project together. And I'm thankful to the whole team of the Berlin mayor's office. And together with Gorki Theater, we decided to start a campaign for Mr. İmamoğlu. And I had a project with Gorki Theater. I was one of the prisoners of Silivri, and now Mr. İmamoğlu is there, and I was in solitary confinement in a prison cell, and he is now in the same cell. So we created this 101 size of the prison cell of Silivri, and we will put them in front of the mayor's office, the Rathaus in Berlin, and we will open it to the visitors to give them a chance to experience what solitary confinement is. And Mr. Mayor will be at the opening, and he will do the opening speech, and there'll be others and messages from İmamoğlu and Mr. Özgür Özel. So that's why it's an important thing. And hopefully on the 1st of October at 3 o'clock, I'll be waiting all the Berlin's people, and they can join us and support us, show solidarity, and experience solitary confinement and understand better what the conditions are in Turkey for the political prisoners.
Yeah, thank you very much. Certainly, very important project. And since I was raised in Berlin and grew up there, I'm proud of my city that the mayor is doing that. Thank you very much. So now time is really up. Dr. Kaynar, Dr. Dündar, thank you so much for participating here in our event, and also to the audience. I found the discussion very informative. I hope that you also found our discussion informative. I wish you all a good afternoon, and we look forward to welcoming you at our next event and maybe see you in Berlin on October the 1st.
Yes, please. Thank you so much for your solidarity and support.
Yes, thank you, Dan, for the invitation and for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Cheers.
Ciao.